In 2022, a man and a woman were sleeping through the night. It would be around 3 a.m. when they were woken up by someone banging on their glass window in front of their home, yelling at them to call the police or the ambulance. At first, there was no lights outside his front door, so the man would enter inside his house to turn on the light to get a clearer view of who was standing in front of their home. When the light finally came on, both couples would move to the door to take a closer look at who this person was. They knew the person, and what the man and woman saw next would really traumatize them and the people living around the neighborhood who saw what happened. This story contains graphic descriptions of violence that may disturb some viewers. Hence, viewers and listeners' discretion is highly advised. But before I do get into the story, if you're a lover of disturbing, dark and mysteriously spooky stories presented narratively, you may consider subscribing to this channel, turn on all post notifications, and gently pet the like button. And with that said, let's get into today's story. This story takes place in Brisbane, Australia on the 10th of May 2022. Stanley Obi was a man born and raised in Nigeria, West Africa. At a certain stage in his life, the Nigerian man would move to Australia to advance his career as a practicing nurse. A look into his LinkedIn profile did show he obtained a graduate diploma in public health at the University of Queensland, Australia, and was even a registered nurse. While in Australia, he would meet a woman by the name of Sarah Moj, who was from Meningie in South Australia. It was revealed that both had first met in 2017 at a Christmas party, and after which they had a one-night stand. However, Sarah would fall pregnant for Stanley. When Stanley discovered the pregnancy, at first, he was conflicted and did not know what to do or how to go about the news. During a conversation with a friend, based on the situation he now found himself in, Stanley's friend would say that Stanley, being a Christian man, meant he held Christian values, and Stanley told him he wouldn't be able to allow his baby to grow up without a father. And with that, he finally made up his mind. He started to date Sarah, and it was actually due to Sarah being pregnant with his child would he start an actual relationship with her. Stanley Obi would later quit his job to move closer and start a life with Sarah Moj, but would later take up another job as a care manager for a retirement community in Brisbane. This he had done in an effort to commit to try to make a life being a father to his child. A friend of Sarah would say that Sarah grew up as an only child for the most part of her life, and being an only child when she was little meant that she never had siblings. She was mostly alone while at home, and as such, didn't want that for her own kids. Hence the reason she wanted children. And when I say children, I meant lots of children. She wanted many children of her own. After almost 3 years of being with Stanley, Sarah, who already had a child from a previous relationship, would have 2 more kids with Stanley. Now both couples had 4 children under their care. When the kids began to grow, it immediately became evident that for Sarah, her children were really her whole world. As they grew, she began to homeschool her children and would even eventually start a YouTube channel where she occasionally documented the series of homeschooling and posted videos of her children cooking, doing science experiments, and learning about human anatomy. In both her personal Facebook page and in her YouTube channel, she would introduce her children to growing their own food, as she wanted to have some land and look after goats, cows, and whatever animals needed a home. She taught the kids how to cook various dishes while cooking along with them in a fun, interactive way. In fact, she took whatever opportunity she had to spend quality time with her children, which was so evident from her social accounts. She also regularly posted pictures and videos on her Facebook pages to display her love and affection, and how her children meant much to her. Sarah also wasn't just a devoted mother. She had also described herself as a self-taught photographer and ran her own photography business, which she would regularly promote on her Facebook page. She specialized in family portraits and also had a passion for capturing special moments. In April of 2020, Sarah had written a post on her Facebook page expressing her love for her children and how her heart beats for them, with one of those posts saying, "When you have no strength left, you have your children. When you are tired, they energize you, and when your heart is mourning, they bring joy to your soul. To my babies, I thank you for choosing me, the ones I have now and the ones I'm still waiting for. Is all my heart beats for. I'm eternally grateful." However, over the following months, that lovely relationship both lovers had between each other would begin to turn sour.
Hello.
Oh, do you know the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man? Do you know the Muffin Man who lives on Drury Lane?
In 2020, Sarah would start accusing Stanley of being an abuser and that he was trying to kill both her and her children. Their relationship had turned sour and they would both apply for domestic violence orders against each other. And a few months later, around late 2020, both lovers would separate following a toxic relationship. The mother of four would claim on her social media page that Stanley had told her that he was going to kill them. In her words, she would say, "What do I do? Send them on Saturday knowing they might not come home, or wait until the 8th and have them forcibly removed." In another bizarre social media post on Facebook, Sarah would say if she and her kids were ever to end up dead, that it would be murder. And she even urged online users to point the finger at Mr. Stanley Obi if anything were to happen, claiming that it wouldn't be an accident, neither would it be her taking the life of her kids together with hers. This disturbing post showed how bad their relationship had gone over the past few years. On another post, she had also described Stanley as being violent and had told the Facebook domestic violence group members she wasn't looking for relationship advice since there was nothing she hadn't tried to save their relationship. She would also urge her friends and other online group members to say something that would discourage the father of three from either harming her or the kids, especially whenever they see them both together with the children, to make sure nothing bad ever happens to either her or her children. Sarah Moj would also claim that hospital records detailed Stanley's apparent attempt to take his own life and how he had been suffering from mental breakdown, including how their daughter's hospital admission had disappeared following Stanley's violent episodes. But according to her, she would write how she just doesn't get it since he was just a nurse and there was no way he had access to delete the hospital records, which supposedly detailed Stanley's mental breakdown and resulting abuse. She would say, "I don't understand anything. How crazy am I? Did I imagine everything? I know I didn't, but I can't understand." According to her, since there was no evidence of any abuse on his part without the hospital records, that meant the police hadn't believed her when she reported her estranged ex-lover's odd behavior, and the police had also accused her of trying to cause trouble. Sarah was so convinced that something bad would happen to both her and the children, and it would turn out she was right. Something horrific and insane would happen to her, and it wouldn't be just her. Even after their breakup, Sarah had never denied Stanley access to see the children, and a friend would later say that Sarah often went on outings with him in order to help with the kids. On the other hand, Stanley, who now had a new lover, A woman by the name of Coletta Phillips was not happy that his former girlfriend Sarah was the one now in custody of their children following their breakup. As days went by, he had the thought of taking back his children. In 2021, Sarah was now officially homeschooling the kids who were still under her care, while Stanley would apply for child custody in court. And following months of legal battle between Stanley and Sarah, the court would order that Stanley maintain custody of their 3 children, while Sarah was to maintain the custody of 1 out of the 4 children, which was just the son she had from her previous relationship. This order from the courts came on the March of 2022, and it really bothered Sarah a lot, especially since she had claimed that Stanley was abusive, and she feared for what would happen to the other 3 kids who were now under the care of their supposed abusive father. Hence, she decided to do something to ensure the safety of both her and her children. On the early hours of the 10th of March 2022, which was a day after the court awarded Stanley the custody of 3 of their children, and a day that was supposed to be a day to mark the beginning of a new chapter, having 1 custody of his children, Sarah would quietly drive out from her home and made her way into her ex-boyfriend's new home, which was in New Bates, south of Brisbane. She somehow managed to break into the home, and when she was inside the house, she then brought out a can containing a liquid and began to gently and quietly pour the contents over the floor of the rooms in the home. She also made her way to the room where Stanley, his new girlfriend, and 1 of the children who was sleeping next to the father, Stanley, was. After that, she then doused the liquid on Stanley, his new girlfriend, and that little girl sleeping close to Stanley. And in a matter of seconds, Stanley would have sprung up immediately from his bed while wailing in agony. It would turn out that the liquid content which she threw around the floor of the home was indeed petrol, a highly combustible liquid. She had doused Stanley in petrol and would then set him on fire. The petrol, which was thrown all over the floor of the house and then onto Stanley, would start a chain reaction which started an inferno that would ultimately engulf the whole house in flames. It would also turn out that Sarah's intention while going into that house was not to save herself or her children, but rather she had sneaked into the home with the intention of getting rid of Stanley once and for all. And this was following that order from the court, which made her lose custody of her 3 children. This devastated Sarah. She felt like her whole world was lost after losing her children. It would also turn out that in the Facebook post, which she posted and made mention of still waiting for more babies, she really meant it. When Stanley and Sarah already had 2 kids under their care, she had told Stanley she wanted 6 more children, but Stanley refused on having 8 children, stating that he would not have children that he could not afford to support, and vehemently refused to bring children into the world only to raise them on welfare. They would eventually go on to have 2 more kids, and after they now had 4 children under their care, Stanley was like, okay, that's it, no more. But 4 kids just weren't enough for Sarah. It just wouldn't do for her. The loving relationship between Sarah and Stanley started falling apart based on that disagreement. After breaking up in late 2020, then in November 2021, which was a year or almost a year after their breakup, Sarah had also described the first full year of homeschooling as a success, while also boasting about her son being a year ahead of his age, as she hinted at an acrimonious split between her and Stanley. She had said, and I quote, "I hope I'm not forced through family court to send him to school to essentially repeat the year and hold him back. But there's not much I can do," she wrote. 3 months earlier, which was in August 2021, she had also written another Facebook post saying, "We're taking a little break. Our family is going through something huge and we're out preserving and recovering." These were the posts she had written on Facebook in the months leading up to the court battle, that ultimately resulted in her losing custody of 3 of the 4 children. And this seemed to be the moment that had triggered her horrific act of violence. This particular post had possibly been made after she found out that the kids would now be in Stanley's custody. It would also turn out that all the claims she made about Stanley being abusive, violent, wanting to take his own life, having mental health issues, or having medical reports in hospital based on his supposed medical health condition, or even wanting to kill either her or their children, were supposedly all lies. None of them might have been true. Why the specific hospital Sarah Mudge was referring to was unknown. A spokeswoman from the Metro North Health in Australia would later mention that hospitals have stringent record-keeping procedures, which further invalidated Sarah's claims on Stanley tampering with his health records. She had possibly made those up the days preceding the court custody hearing so that Stanley wouldn't be able to get hold of their children and to make him out to be the villain while she plays the victim card, while in fact she might have possibly been the violent and abusive one during the period of their relationship. The whole purpose of the relationship for her was just to make more babies, whether she could afford to take care of them or not. But Stanley didn't want to raise so many children. 4 was enough for him, but Sarah wanted as many as possible she could get. This fact would also be supported during the period of a deteriorating relationship, as Sarah Mudge would give Stanley the option of leaving the relationship while claiming he was nothing more than a sperm donor and that she would find a way to have more kids regardless. Following the disagreements, both lovers would eventually split and both would go their separate ways. In June 2021, more than 6 months after their breakup, Sarah had also taken to Facebook to type a long post in a Facebook group that she was looking for African sperm donors, explaining she wanted to have as many kids as possible in quick succession due to, in quotes, her expiring uterus. A Facebook group of which you can read the rest, but I'm focused on the last sentence, which read, "I have 4 wonderful children, but my heart is not yet full. I only have a few years to complete my family, and I would like to have as many babies as I can." Sarah would also say she was a single mama by choice and intended to stay that way until her children were grown, and had also told potential donors that she was specifically after men of African descent to ensure all her children had similar features. This particular post from Sarah was said to have set off alarm bells with donors in the group, because she seemed to want kids to fill in some void in her life. And with this, potential male sperm donors became wary of her because they didn't feel she could provide adequate support for her children, or even for more of these children which she wanted. Like I said, this was something Stanley also thought of. Stanley only wanted children he could adequately provide and care for. It would be several months later, after their breakup, which was around late October 2021, when Stanley and his new lover, a woman by the name of Coletta Phillips, who was a marketing professional, would buy their new dream house and would eventually move in together. Stanley Obi and his new partner had hoped that living in that house together with the children now in their custody meant a sign of a new beginning. Unfortunately, they had only lived in the house for some months before the horror that took place in that home. A friend of Sarah, who didn't want to be identified, would also later confirm that all Sarah wanted was a tribe of children, and that she must have been at the point of no return to plan that attack on Stanley. Something which was evident in her Facebook blog that bears the same name as her YouTube channel, Handsful Heartfuller, with an introduction that read, "Homeschooling Our Little Tribe in Australia," a page which Sarah had dedicated to documenting her children's homeschooling. The blog also had videos showing how she teaches and supervises the small kids as they cook. It also shows how they normally go out to have a good time together. She had also described the educational benefits of shopping in another post, showing a mother who really wanted to bring up her children on how to be economical and responsible right from their childhood. I know a lot of parents hate it, but it's a great chance to teach them responsibility, math, and understanding that money is not endless. I give my kids $5 each during each shopping trip. Sometimes they get many things. Sometimes they can't afford something and have to put it back, she wrote. This showed a mother who seemed to have the right intentions. The friend also explained that Sarah loved her kids, adding that she knew that without a shadow of a doubt. But for Sarah to do what she had done, that she can honestly say that she was not in her right mind and must have been pushed beyond the point of no return. She was adamant that Sarah Moj was kind, selfless, and always ready to give. According to her choosing actions were not in her character. Also, according to this friend, she got pushed too far and broke. But this statement from Sarah's friend, in which she described Sarah as not being in her right mind, would paint a different picture from another post which Sarah made on her Facebook page days before the court ordered Stanley to maintain custody of their 3 kids. The post she made would prove she was fully aware of what she had planned to do if she was to lose her kids or any of them to Stanley. Days after Stanley had applied for custody hearing of their children, in a Facebook mothers group, Sarah Moj had threatened to kill Mr. Stanley Obi if he took the baby from her. In her words, she would say that he did not try to do this because it's just not an option. I would have killed him. This she wrote about the family dispute. However, this post didn't reveal the disturbing extent Sarah was willing to go if she loses custody of the kids. In a separate post made by another mother asking if she would let a family member cut her child's hair, Sarah had replied violently, saying how she would cut the throat of that person should anyone try cutting her child's hair. This post came weeks after both estranged lovers had privately applied for domestic violence orders against each other before that fire that had been set by Sarah. The horrific attack also came just weeks after Sarah had posted a chilling and cryptic message to Facebook under the heading Relationship Rules, which read, "She's not toxic, bro. You made her like that. Now you think she's crazy. Your decisions reflect her actions. Check yourself." Now, this was a very disturbing post, and it shows how Sarah lost it after losing the custody battle. With the post she made on the 3rd of November 2021 about hoping not to be forced to send the kids to school, which would make them repeat the year, it would be safe to say she had thought she would win the custody of the children, seeing how much she had invested in documenting the teachings, lessons, and fun time she had with the kids. But the blow had come when she had been ordered by the family court to send the kids to Stanley on the Saturday, the 7th of May 2022. There must have been a lot of anger and bitterness behind this particular post she made before the children were eventually handed over to Stanley at his place. It would also be safe to say that she must have felt there was nothing else to live for, and then had planned to end it all.
Say hello.
Hello. Bye.
Would you like some zucchini?
Tayo's the winner. He found the first one. We're still making up lessons by ourselves. So, we do have a plan though. Plan is always a good thing. Find these. So we just drove up the mountain, and honestly, this is so pretty already. We haven't even gotten it out of the car, but the driver.
After a 31-year-old Sarah had broken into the home and set fire to the home of her 33-year-old ex-boyfriend, Mr. Stanley's new 30-year-old girlfriend, Coletta Phillips, including 3 children aged 5, 3 and 2 years old, with 2 of whom were sleeping in a room next door, managed to flee from the burning home. Sarah had tried to set Stanley and his new lover ablaze while his 3 young children were in the house. Disturbingly, she had also doused the child sleeping close to the father, including herself, with petrol, in a bid to make sure every one of them lost their lives that day. She had not been there to save herself or the children from their father's alleged abuse. She had decided that taking everyone's life that day was the next best option. Fortunately, the child sleeping next to Stanley at the time before the inferno took hold of the home managed to escape the flames unharmed when it started. Stanley was able to heroically help the child to safety, shielding them with his own body so the fire doesn't spread to them. As for Stanley, he was not able to make it out of the fire quickly, as his whole focus was to save the rest of his family. During the moment of the fire raging through the house, a hero neighbor known as AI, who got wind of the burning flames, got into the house and managed to drag Stanley's burning body from the wreckage. However, even with his critical wounds, Stanley quickly ran into the street, frantically trying to knock on everyone's door on the street, together with AI. But no one woke up till he knocked on the door of another one of the neighbors' front porch and would bang on their glass door, yelling out to them to call the police. "Call the police, call the police," he said. The next door neighbor would look out through the door in his home, but couldn't make out who it was as it was dark, till they turned the outside light on, only to see that it was Stanley, their neighbor. Immediately the neighbors saw that it was Stanley. After having a look at him that early morning, he quickly realized the severity of the situation. Stanley was completely naked and in serious pain. He was also yelling and pleading with them to call the ambulance. The neighbor's wife would quickly rush into the house and call the ambulance, including the authorities, while the man, who knew Stanley had no time to explain what happened to him, quickly walked towards his garage and looked through the window in his garage. It was at that moment would he see that Stanley's house was fully engulfed in flames as high as 10 meters and with smoke coming out from the windows of his house. Another neighbor, who woke up after seeing the white siren lights from outside that early morning, would work hard to get everyone out of the house, which they did succeed in doing, as the other children sleeping in a different room in the house were rescued. One of the neighbors also tried to rescue another body he saw, but when he tried to get back in, the man saw that the body was significantly burnt already, and with the flame getting hotter, hence he couldn't get back in. Another neighbor, who was with Stanley when emergency services were on their way, would later say that this was a traumatic experience. In his words, he would say he was just obviously in an incredible amount of pain. Apparently, he was a nurse and he kept saying to them, "I'm the critical one, I need help straight away. Tell them I'm the critical one, I need assistance straight away. I'm going to die." He knew he was going to die. He put his hand out to me and my neighbor saying, "I'm going to die." He spoke. Although they knew they couldn't touch him due to infection control as he was severely burnt. However, they continued to talk and encourage him and did all they could to stay with him. And it would be after a long 35 minutes would the emergency services arrive at the scene. Neighbors and the emergency personnel managed to drag Stanley into the stretcher and inside the ambulance vehicle, and he was rushed to the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital. He had suffered 90% of burns to his body. Coletta Phillips, Stanley's girlfriend, only managed to escape with minor burns to his throat, and would be taken along with the 3 children by ambulance to the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital for observation. With her bravery and quick thinking, she was able to save the 2 other children sleeping in another room, including the family pets. Fire crew were also called to the property on that Thursday morning, and inside Stanley's house, it would take them more than 2 hours to douse the flames. They also recovered the scorched body, which the neighbor had earlier seen that early morning. The body would later be confirmed to be that of Sarah Moj. She was burned to death.
Good evening. Tonight, a woman is dead and a man is fighting for life after being doused in petrol and set alight during a shocking domestic violence attack south of Brisbane.
Fighting flames to help the man escape, residents are in complete shock. Police describing the scene as one of the worst they've faced.
Early morning tragedy on a Logan Street. Running from this burning home, police say aged care worker Stanley and his new girlfriend were doused in petrol and set alight before escaping to the street during a disturbing domestic violence attack.
Unfortunately, almost 17 hours later, which was around 10 p.m. that day, Stanley Obi would succumb to his injuries and would be pronounced dead. He had died while trying to protect his children and partner from burning within the flames.
I could see a man who was completely naked, and he was banging on the glass door, yelling, "Call the police and call the police."
He was just pleading for help. His main concern was keeping the 3 children in the house safe.
His exact words were, "I'm going to die," and he put his hand out to me and my neighbor saying, "I'm going to die, I'm a nurse, I'm critical 1, save me, help me, I'm going to die."
Neighbours say Sarah, who died inside the home, also poured petrol over her 3 unharmed children.
I picked up the little one, I can't remember how old, she's a little one, and she was soaking with petrol.
Looking back, it was disturbing, in fact extremely distressing, to see how a seemingly normal woman who seemed to have the best intention for her children, as you can see from the videos on our YouTube channel and Facebook pages, show her behavior going from seemingly joyful to impatient and then completely irrational. And merely looking now in hindsight, one can see how the desire to get as many children as she could possibly get went on her way to take the life of her children's father, and did it in a way that she didn't even consider the consequences her planned reckless behavior would have on the lives of her children or their closer relatives, eventually ending her own life and that of her ex-lover, hence turning their beloved children into an orphan. She not only denied her kids growing up with a responsible and loving father, but also a mother figure. If only her hunger for acquiring children, as if they were just property, were kept under control. Sarah's photography business, known as Smushed Photography, also had a website containing multiple photos of Stanley Obi and their children. I've always enjoyed capturing special moments, no matter what they are. My absolute focus is to make you happy. Spending time getting that perfect shot is what I really enjoy. I would like to focus primarily on newborn and young family photography, and I have a particular passion to include the whole family: young, old, furry, feathery, and scaly. I'm always seeking new ideas and unique families. Her website states, "This perfectly seems to capture the nature of how a woman who seemed to be family oriented and a devoted mom raising her kids and a lover of children lost it all in just a moment of complete madness, and with pure disregard for how her actions would affect the lives of those who knew both her and Mr. Stanley. The deadly pursuit and her obsession to acquire a tribe overshadowed everything else and clouded her sense of good judgment and reasoning, if I'm to put it that way. It's disturbing to see how a woman who couldn't control her emotions after losing custody of these kids decided that the best answer was to end it all, including ending the lives of these lovely children she had dedicated some of her life, time, and energy to raise. With the aftermath of the horrific event, neighbors would talk of how what happened would be with them for life. And according to them, considering what has happened, they now feel unsafe in their own homes, and over the following nights, none of them could sleep properly because of the flashbacks they get as soon as they close their eyes. The trauma and the graphic scenes of what they witnessed that night, they would have to live with for life.
It was just very horrific, very confronting what we were presented with. He was just burnt from head to toe.
Every morning when we wake up, we will wake up to the scene of the house right in front of us, and it will remind us and torment us of what's happened. As soon as we close our eyes, we get all these flashbacks of what happened.
After a 3-day forensic examination, the crime scene was closed down and the property handed over to the insurance company. Friends of Stanley would also start to raise funds to support the children who were made orphans by the act of impatience meted out by their mother. As for Coletta Phillips, she lost all her possessions as they melted in the raging flames, and her friend would also raise a GoFundMe in order to help her begin with her healing journey. Following his death, a memorial would be held for Mr. Stanley Obi as friends and neighbors gathered to pay their tribute. Even though a lot of people didn't know the family, people got together to grieve a man who was described as being kind and compassionate.
The domestic violence has got a ripple effect. It is not only that the couple who is the center of the domestic violence incident who are affected, it is the wider community.
Domestic and family violence has to stop. There are far too many tragedies.
Bye. Bye.